order, and I just
Recording in progress.
oh, we got to get that done. Okay, I clicked on that. Jordan has graciously placed in for our review several Google documents. I was wondering, does everyone know how to access those on the Google on the Google Drive? If not, that's when Jordan can help everybody with a tutorial. You will find historical documents and current ongoing documents there, and even an old guy like me has learned that trick about how to find it. So I guess everybody's comfortable in knowing how to access them. Let's move ahead first with the minutes of the last meeting, and ask if anyone has a motion to approve them as written, or make any additions or corrections.
I can motion to approve the meeting minutes.
So it sounded like Ilana, but I'm not sure.
Oh, Lisa.
Okay, Lisa, and then so do I have a second?
A second.
And whoever that was seconded.
Renee.
And, okay, great. I've got the agenda up, so I'm not seeing people's pictures. So minutes of stand approved as written. Thank you very much. I already spoken about reviewing the previous documents. Does anyone have any questions they might like to ask about those?
Any of the documents, anything that we received, like of all the stuff we received?
Yes, that'd be fine. You fire away.
In the report that, well, I don't know if this is a question or input for our report, but so I've been in the district a long time, and there have been a number of programs that have gone through, and they're supposed to bridge the gap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I like what I saw when Cheryl Proctor presented. I definitely like what I saw, but my concerns are, it's just like, I went to a meeting, I don't know, a few years ago, and they were talking about what a beautiful racial equity statement we had. They had hired a woman to do a racial equity statement. She said, this is a beautiful racial equity statement. And my thought was, okay, so you have this racial equity statement. Who's reading it? Who's implementing it? Because obviously we're not there, right? So this is an excellent program, but what has changed so that when this program is rolled out, are we still looking at a gap in discipline? Are we still looking at, we don't have people of color in front of our kids? Are we still, these are things that we know affect our kids, right? Do we still have a problem with students not having curriculum that centers them? So yes, you can have this beautiful plan, But if there are other things that are not there, we are still going to lose our children. And that is my concern. So I know there's this professional development that's rolling out, and they're going to have some days in August. But they need to have some days now. August to get ready for school that starts, what? I don't know what day it starts, because I know they're voting. Have they voted on the calendar? But that's my big concern. That yes, it's a nice plan, but all these other things that we have been talking about for years, have those issues been solved so that our students can concentrate on learning? So that was my input.
Thank you for that, Renee. And just thinking from the perspective of the feedback and continuous conversations and the upcoming proposed budget and the subsequent budget cycle, I think a lot of those themes will be discussed. And I think as CBRC prepares a letter, or well, first, once you get the budget and prepare the letter, and I say letter, but what I'm referencing is the report, and kind of like assessing that, that would be, I think, some incredible feedback. And on a quick side note there, I wasn't sure if it was, I don't think we saw it on the agenda, but when you mentioned about the calendar, I also thought about the budget calendar. And so on Tuesday, the board did vote to move the reporting date a week out. So the CBRC report to the board will occur on May 17th instead of the 10th.
I thought I read something May 14th. Oh, that's when it's due. Our thing is due.
It's due on the 17th.
Oh,
I think I made it erroneously stated 14th, but it's 1 week longer than what, so adding 7 to 10 would be the 17th. So
okay. Thank you.
my comment about Renee's observations are these. It seems like anything that the district does takes a long time to roll out for implementation, sometimes encompassing several years. Some of these ongoing areas of concern have been addressed in various ways for quite a long time, several decades, in fact. And if you might recall, early in our discussions in an earlier meeting, I asked that the district engage in a review of its strategic investments, and by that I mean we've invested in a number of ways to try to address these problems, and how effective are individual investments that have been made and are ongoing in their implementation. And after the last board meeting just the other night, there was an adoption of an external audit that, at least it's my understanding, and Ailey can correct me if I'm wrong, that the external audit will accumulate the data from representative districts similar to ourselves, and to assess precisely that. And so the board will be better informed as to where it needs to continue investments, alter investments, make new investments and so on. So,
Yeah, and there we did have that discussion, and it's going to be exciting to get into that deep work. I like to reframe it as an assessment or a deep dive analysis. Audit always sounds so like, oh, like something's wrong, right? Like, oh, something's wrong. And it could be perspective, but I know there's, I think about all of our teachers. I think about all the counselors, everyone, right? They work so hard. Everyone does so much to support our students. And so when we think about this analysis and opportunity, it is to like deep dive into how we're using and allocating resources to align to our strategy, and like how does that sync up to what we want to do, and how does that compare with maybe some or how does that compare against other districts who may be implementing similar strategies, and really pose a question to us around what are our opportunities to reassess. Maybe there's a best practice or a lever to reassess that we haven't considered or we should be considering to get to that. So it will be a very insightful partnership to address some of those questions.
I like the way you describe it, and I do think it's concerning that the vote on whether to proceed with that assessment was a 4-3 vote, and which in my mind means that maybe there's some education endeavors that need to go forth, but that's just my opinion. Are there any other comments that members would like to make? Renee kicked us off with a good one.
I see that the map data comes later, so I won't ask about that yet. I'll wait till we cover it.
Okay. So are we ready to proceed with Norberto's presentation on the local option levy?
There's just two things I want to make sure we cover before that. Yeah.
Okay.
So one is if there are questions moving forward that you have for the staff, if you want to just send me an email. Some of you have already been doing that. I'm actually compiling all of the questions in a document that the staff will work out of, and we'll make sure you all have access to that once it's ready. So feel welcome to just email me if you want. If we come up with a better option later, that's fine. But for now, I think that's been a pretty good way to do it. The other thing is that we've prepared, or the budget proposal copies are going to be printed soon. We wanted to just make sure, or we wanted to ask you all if you all want a hard copy, physical copy. I think we're going to try to send that digitally, but we wanted to just ask you first if you want a hard copy. If you don't answer now, you can send me an email later, but if you do want one, we're planning on mailing them out. We can't be completely sure how long it'll take in the mail, but you could also come and pick it up from the school district once it's ready. But I just wanted to bring that up in this meeting so that, yeah, because it's coming very soon.
Well, I'll chime in that I plan to be out of town after the 26th for a few days, so I'll be present at the meeting on the 26th and would appreciate a hard copy at that time.
And just for argument's sake, we'll print copies, but It is about 600 pages. So I'm more than happy to send an email and a PDF version of it. But of course, we'll have some copies available and can do that. So just from my perspective, I would encourage a digital copy, but I know we all process and learn differently. So can respect that.
Well, my problem is I'm not sure what my Wi-Fi connection will be at the beach, and so working digitally might be a problem. So
That's a good point.
So I'm maybe a rare case nowadays, but
And I did want to chime in for clarification, at least Renee, something you shared or a comment you shared regarding map data. The map data that we have is the information that's there as a resource. We're not planning on discussing it specifically. So there was not going to be a staff presentation on map data. It's there as a reminder, as an available resource. So if you did have a question, definitely question, comment, definitely share it because, or we can wait till the end, but just because we weren't having a formal presentation on the map data today.
Well, so my concern is, I can't understand how somebody presents data to us and tells us how many students, I'm sorry, I'm talking, so they tell us how many students took the test in the fall and took the test again in the winter, right? Well, they didn't tell us, and they said that 93% of all our students took the test in the winter. Well, how many students took the test in the fall? So I look at the second graders and they give me this number of second graders that met expectations, but how many second graders are there? So it was data that I couldn't even say, oh, this is, what?
Outgoing minutes.
So that's why I was asking if they're giving us the demographics from second through eighth grade of who took the test. I mean, how many people, I'm sorry, the scores, how many people increased their score? And I'm guessing it just means increase because, like if you went from a 36% to a 37%, that's an increase. So it just, I'm sitting there saying, okay, so this is, I'm glad that people raise their scores, but how many kids are we talking about? How many Black students were we talking about? How many? And I know they kept saying the numbers for our Indigenous students were small. Well, we know that, but how many kids are there? And we can't find it on, at least I can't find it online. The latest thing I can find is the forecasting for 2021, I think. But I don't have the numbers for 21, 22. So it's not the whole story. And I was just wondering, did they do that purposely? Because this man knows how to present data. So I know he knows how to present data. If my student did a report like that in my math class, they would not get a good grade. I'm just saying. So I had a big problem with that report. Just saying.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will definitely pass that information on to Dr. Adams. I don't have answers. I don't, but we can certainly pass that on and then just, I don't know, I think we're going to have another meeting. Maybe there's an opportunity for him to come to that meeting or at least to provide some additional detail.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
So I'm not sure where in the agenda we were talking about, and Renee brought up the kind of our review and report. And I don't know if we want to talk about it now or wait until later.
It actually doesn't
Jordan?
have it on the agenda. It's resources and documents that Jordan shared with us. So when I saw that document, I thought maybe we were going to talk about it. So that's my fault. It doesn't say.
Oh yeah, I meant more of some of the issues you brought up around racial equity and how the budget really meets those. And I think Noberto was talking about how some of those comments can be provided as feedback in our letter to the board. So I didn't know, because last week we talked about the local option levy in our letter, and then same like our budget review letter. And I don't know if we want to just talk about it briefly here, or we want to wait until the end and talk about kind of our strategy approach moving forward.
I'll quickly chime in and would recommend if we can get through the local option levy information. And then towards the end, towards the Q&A section and discussion section, I would defer to the committee to then talk through the logistics and additional areas regarding the reports. So if that
So
sounds
let me do an executive decision
Yeah.
and let's move ahead with the presentation and on the local option levy, and then we'll come back to what Lisa has raised for that discussion.
Great. Well, oh, sorry about that, Roger.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, then for today, the good thing about the local option levy information is that we had a presentation at our last meeting. So we had an opportunity to walk through, get some background. What is local option levy? How does it function? So for today, maybe some of you will be disappointed. I do not have a slide deck. There are no PowerPoint. There's no Google slide deck. So we just have a few PDFs that we want to share that talk through the information and really just provide some details regarding our actuals, because we're a year in the rears. So not until we get all the local option levy revenue do we then make the calculation to confirm what the prior year was. But then also the second part to that is sharing what our projection or estimate will be for this current year. And so it's a insight into what we're seeing. So why don't we start? And maybe Jordan, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I can share.
Let's do the actuals, the 2020 to 2021.
Okay. Sorry, I was just putting stuff in the chat also. Here we go. Window, there we go. Can you all see this?
I see. I do not see it. Oh, now I do. There we go.
Okay.
It's a little small. Slightly.
Sorry. My mouse. Is that better?
Maybe a little bigger, a little more.
A little bit more?
Yeah, that's good. Great.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, it's good for me, but obviously for everyone else.
Yeah, let me know if you, yeah.
Yeah, and so with this report is a report outlining what the actual distribution was of the funds across different schools. And so what we see here is our audited enrollment. So once the enrollment numbers were finalized, along with the general fund staff. When we say general fund staff, these are like the licensed educators. And it then shows what it would look like without the levy. And the difference, say 873, that's what the local option levy was able to fund. And when we look across the table here, we see the various schools, and along with that, you see what's funded with the general fund staff, what would it look like without the levy, and then the difference being what the local option levy provides. So as we scroll, if you scroll up through this page, Jordan, we see how valuable the local option levy is, and how it supports all of our schools across the board, from elementary down to high schools to middle schools and so on. And so we see how the local option levy plays itself out at the school level. If we go to the other document, and similarly, if you can zoom in, Jordan.
Yep. Is this the correct one?
Actually, if you could pull up the other one that has the detail, the object code detail, that'd be, or definitions, that'd be great. It provides a little bit more insight into how the calculations determine. So, awesome, thank you. So when we start looking at what our estimate's going to be, there's a few components into determining the formula. And so we take a look at what our associated payroll costs would be. And so these are all the different variables that feed into total compensation. So we look at salary, and then there's associated payroll costs. So when we say associated payroll costs, we're referring to the retirement contribution, we're referring to the Social Security contribution, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, group health insurance. And so all of these components make up a percentage of the associated payroll costs. If you scroll slightly towards the actual column, there you go. We see that for last year, the actual associated benefit cost was 50%, 50.47%. And so when we take a look at the average teacher cost, we multiply that to then get the associated costs for that one FTE, for that one full-time equivalent. And if you go back to the other side of the screen, Jordan, awesome, thank you. Salaries for licensed FTEs was approximately $245.6 million, which represented approximately 3,161 FTEs. When you take that number and divide it into the salaries, you get approximately 77,680. You multiply that against a fringe rate. There's some rounding adjustments here. The total compensation being the 116,883 is then the average FTE cost, which is salary and the benefits, which then is taken into we then divide that into the local option amount, which gives us a teacher's funded. One thing to point out is that our current local option levy is $1.99 per thousand. And as time goes on, depending on the rate of taxes collected and the rate of increase in FTE costs, the teachers funded by the local option levy would be trailing down. So it's just a math problem. It's just part of the math that goes into calculating the local option estimate. And so with that, that was essentially, those are the two reports. The other report is a duplicate with less detail regarding the object code description. So we just wanted to add some more detail so that folks can get a better sense of how the associated costs are calculated. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Well, I'll kick off with a question. How many teachers did we fund in 21, 22? And what are you projecting the local option levy will fund in the next budget cycle of 22, 23, if it's going down?
So I haven't done the full-on calculation yet. That's on the to-dos for FY23 to just have that back to have that number, but I can share we're forecasting about $109 million in the local option levy, and with anticipated FTE costs of about 117,000. So we just do some quick math here, we can get a general estimate of what that would look like, assuming it pans out to be the case. According to that, would be closer to, if we can get to $109 million in local option levy, that would be a big jump, and that would be close to 920 teachers that we would be able to fund. And for this current year, it's going to come down to what our final numbers are looking like. And as of the last cycle, or our last quarterly analysis, we were close to a little over 100 million. So it's probably going to be on par with what we saw this past year. The other variable that we'll keep in mind is going to be the associated costs. I keep wanting to say fringe costs, which is just such a very technical word, but it's the associated costs with that. That will be another component that we'll be keeping track of.
Associated costs, just to be clear, are associated with what?
Would be,
benefits, yeah.
yeah. Yep. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, the benefit. So the associated costs being Social Security, healthcare, unemployment insurance, and a variety of other different factors that make that value.
So Norberto, can I just ask a question based on what was sent out and kind of how we line up our review? It looked like there was like 99 million collected to date. Is that correct? Or you just said 100 million?
And that was, one second, let me pull this up. Correct. So that is about 100 million, or yeah, 99.269 million.
Okay. And then from that, if it's based on 116,000 salary and benefits, that it's looking to fund 851 teaching positions for 21-22.
Correct. And then
Okay.
next year, we'll be looking at the actuals for this year. So once we eventually close the books or wrapped up with the audit, which would be in December, we then have our finalized numbers.
Okay. And then one other thing it asks us to verify is that that money has been deposited into the general fund in a sub account. So as that, I'm assuming that 100 million that's happened.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And in our budget book, we have, I'll eventually, I can follow up and send the account and screenshot just for argument.
Verification.
Yeah,
just
for
confirmation.
verification.
Okay.
Yep, where we keep
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Other
Your
questions?
presentation has, in years previous, CBRC only commented on the last present budget year and its as it was completed. In more recent years, the CBRC has adopted talking about the present year. So it's and understandably, you won't have those final figures until December. So it's but we're projecting that the year will finish as you've outlined. Are there other questions of Berto's presentation to us?
And just one question for the committee is kind of thinking about, like, if kind of going through this, like the first time, was this method of presenting helpful, or prefer kind of the slideshow or other feedback? Were there pieces of information here like, oh, it'd be better if it was, maybe consider discussing or sharing it in a different view? Is there anything? And obviously, if nothing comes to mind right now, but that would just be one question I'd have for the committee as we get through this part of the presentation.
I mean, I'll just speak that I thought the presentation you gave last week, kind of how it's calculated, was very helpful, because then this moving forward, it all makes sense as to how that's calculated.
Well, thank you. I'll turn it over to Roger.
Well, I'm glad Lisa stated what she did. It's my observation that our staff support has been superior this year. But moving on, thank you very much for the presentation on the local option levy. And let's see, where are we now? I guess Lisa, we're now to the point where we might discuss the working documents that you drafted for us, looking at last year's report. So you want to take the lead on that?
Sure. So I think on the local option levy, I kind of took a stab at updating it based on the information that was sent out in preparation for this meeting. So I think it's just, if everybody can just take a quick look at it, I kind of highlighted the numbers that were updated for 2020, 21, 22, and then kind of looking hindsight 2021. So I think if we can have everybody review it before next meeting, we can finalize that piece of it. And then on the budget review, I didn't really change much, because I think a lot of the conversation is going to come once the budget proposal comes out, and to see what are the rising issues. And I know Renee brought some up at the beginning of this meeting. And I want to apologize to Alona, because I said I would reach out to her, and I didn't get to reach out to her until last night to kind of talk about what would be our strategy for dividing up the work. But in looking at the report, and it's kind of an overview and then some observations and recommendations. I think we could either split it up into those 3 sections and have 2 or 3 people work on each of those sections. Or I think it's to look at what kind of like the higher level review. And I think last year we focused on service levels, and then it was racial equity and social justice, and how we're meeting some of our goals and objectives for historically served communities and underrepresented communities, and one or two other subject matters. So I think we can take it either, like I said, either split up the sections or decide once we go through the budget if there's like 3 or 4 issues that rise to the top that we want to make some observations as well as recommendations on. So I think maybe we can talk about that here or once we see the budget and really how we want to go about it.
Let me just ask, are what you've done, are those drafts in the Google Drive now?
They are. The local option levy has been updated based on the numbers that were provided for this meeting. The budget review letter, other than changing dates, I did not touch any of the observations or the recommendations because it's really going to depend on what this upcoming proposal looks like. But yes,
And
they
just-
are on the shared drive, and
Okay, good.
that's where we're going to keep them.
Oh, okay. So I'm open to anybody who wants to make comment to what Lisa has presented, and thank you very much for doing that.
So the levy is done. You want us to look over it, but it's all current. That's what I'm asking.
Yes, it is. And so other than just verifying what we heard tonight from Noberto, and I think he said he would send like a screen grab that the money has actually been received, which is kind of like our check mark that it is in receipt. Otherwise, I think it is just everybody review it, see if there's anything to comment on, and then we can finalize that and get it off our plate.
Great. Thank you.
Well, just to clarify, Noberto, the money that is put in the side account is tapped on a quarterly basis. Is that not correct?
It's at the end of the year. We do so we reconcile at the end of the year. Since it's on a side account or the sub account, it then once we wrap up the year, we then apply it. It's almost like against the salaries, like almost like a credit that gets applied.
Yeah, Roger, I think last year it was verified as of like a certain date. So I think it was like as of April 1st, which would make sense if it's by quarter, that as of the first quarter, this much amount has been collected or received, right? Noberto, is that what you're saying? And then you do a final audit at the end of the year?
And it would be two. One would be what was the actuals from last year. So once we wrapped up the actuals from last year, and then the current numbers we'd have as of our, we just recently closed the third quarter and are like going through our process. So it would most likely be information probably end of December, but I'll go and double check that. That is actually something to clarify that I need to clarify on my end. But we do have the sub account information. We have the information from the actuals, and it's the current projection that I'll get some clarification.
Other observations, comments? I don't hear any, so I guess we'll move on. Jordan, is on my copy of the agenda is the follow-up of the questions that I submitted in an email that two subjects. One was concerning deferred maintenance of the district and what the plan is to eradicate that. And then the other one was whether or not we have the ability to reopen collective bargaining units. And behind that question is the observation that we're short on bus drivers for regular school children. We're short on sped bus drivers. We're short on custodians. That is pre-pandemic, incidentally. It's been forever the case for 5 or 6 years, and and so on it goes. And so it seems to me that if we have the ability to reopen bargaining units, it might be appropriate for CBRC to opine to the board that they ought to be reopened, that the district ought to make sure that it's offering a competitive wage. So right now, the head custodian of Franklin is telling me he trains two new custodians on, and then they immediately go out to Gresham because they get a higher wage out there. So if that's the case, then I think Portland Public Schools ought to be the premier salary provider and in all its areas, and so we get full complement of personnel. So anyway, I'll let you answer the questions.
Regarding the deferred maintenance, and so the district went through a study in the spring of 2018 to implement what's known as a facility condition assessment. And as they went through the process, they identified approximately $615 million worth of areas that needed additional, that would need like attention and addressing. And the team went through an additional assessment to assess or an assessment to review all of the information and think through what that would look like when we incorporate soft costs. So like when we think about permits and a variety of other work that would go into correcting and fixing the items that were noted that needed attention. And at that point, the costs would exceed $1 billion. And so in addressing that, that's when the first phase of the capital improvements began with the bond programs. So from 2012 and beginning to modernize the buildings through the 2017 bond, the 2020 bond, to continue to implement capital bond infrastructure projects to address a lot of what the facility condition assessment identified that needed attention. And so the team, and I think about Dan Young and Marina Crosswell, like all the folks in the Office of School Modernization that are like focusing on all these efforts, that they'll be ongoing. And so long as our Portland taxpayers continue to approve our bonds and promote that and want to see that type of work continue and see a lot of these conditions improve, these facility conditions improve. The goal is to continue with ongoing bond cycle over the next several years to address all of these items. And just generally speaking, because it's the will of the community, the will of the taxpayer that would promote and vote on these measures. And these are like these long-term cycles that go well into 20, 30-year cycles of bonds, because by the time you start in 2012 and by the time you wrap around and address everything, it'll be time to start talking about that building in 2012 that received those upgrades. So it's this continuous rhythm cycle that will continue, that we're very appreciative of the taxpayer support that approves these bonds. So it's going to be a big key factor in addressing the deferred maintenance and improving the facilities. And then with respect to the second question, Roger, around ability to open up like collective bargaining agreements, I don't have a response. I would need to connect with our team to just kind of understand the nuance of each of one of our bargaining agreements. You know, generally speaking, there may be clauses that allow for something like that, or if the timing is in sync with the negotiation cycle to start a new collaborative agreement, that may be an opportunity to assess, but I would need to go back to just get more details to how the technical aspects of that would work.
Well, observation. I believe it is possible to reopen a collective bargaining agreement, and I'm sure you'll get staff response about following a certain cycle and all that. But we have ongoing problems of insufficient personnel. For example, I volunteer at Franklin High School, as you all know. Franklin High School is a building of over 300 square feet, 1,000 square feet. It has 2.5 custodians every night. We were promised 12 when we were on the design advisory group. Then we were told, no, you're only allowed 8. We've never had 8. We get 2.5. One half spends all the time painting graffiti. So it just is very frustrating. The district contracted with custodians. 10 were sent to Benson, 2 were sent to Franklin. Franklin and Grant are the 2 most populous schools, and yet they were denied custodians, whatever. And the cluster people said, oh, it is what it is. Well, I'm sorry, then I would eliminate the cluster positions and use those resources elsewhere. So as you might detect, I'm a little bit fed up with it's been 5-6 years, so on. Franklin High School was in the first bond of 2012. They didn't turn soil until 2015. It was not occupied till 2017, and the district immediately signed off on completion of construction before it was really fully occupied and problems were identified. There have been work orders extant since that time of opening, and they're still wanting attention. So, I was told by one of the repair guys in the building the other day that they're down from 300 to 80 right now. So the district isn't following through on the promises they made to the voters. At least that's my point of view, and that's where I'm coming from. So.
And Roger, just for my continuing understanding, is that from the perspective of the promise to the voters being regarding like the facility enhancements, or having additional custodians and support personnel?
Well, it's both. I mean, the promise to the voters was we will maintain our properties as we modernize them, so we don't find ourselves in a deferred maintenance situation that has precipitated the inattention that accumulated over decades for an aging infrastructure, obviously. But the early sign off on completion of construction was one of the glaring examples was the Franklin must have a dance floor. Well, they didn't install the proper dance floor. They signed off on the construction. Now the district is stuck with having to replace the dance floor, and they have yet to do so. So we artificially cushion the flooring with mats and that kind of stuff for dancers because it wasn't constructed correctly. So, and I fear we've signed off on other buildings as they have been completed. And it's my observation that you really ought to wait until about 2 years of occupancy to realize that, as we just realized, the faculty lounge had a series of electric plugs go out, and locating the panel where the circuit breaker for that was way down at the end of another hallway in another room. How it got there, I don't know, but anyway, the thermostat for that room is in another room and so on. It's crazy. So.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll move on. We're now to the point on the agenda, as I have it, Jordan, where anybody can ask any questions or and seek answers to their questions. So anybody have a question they'd like to ask? Looks like staff is lucking out. Jordan, did you have something to say?
Not to say, like, yeah. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, if you all come up with questions later on, feel free to just email me. Okay. I'll add them to a document, and then I'll send everyone a link to that, so that you can see them as the staff are answering.
Okay, well, the board is receiving the superintendent's proposed budget on next Tuesday, the 26th of April. I presume the meeting starts at 6 o'clock. At least that's the normal start time. I haven't seen the notice yet, but and if it's all possible, I would encourage you to be there and hear the presentation and public comment that might be made and that sort of thing. And then, so you all know that personally, I will be out of town on the 27th, 28th, and 29th of that week. And Jordan, would you review for us what our meeting schedule is after that? The 26th is we receive the budget. When is our next meeting? It's 3rd of May, I believe.
Yeah. So after we receive the budget, the next meeting is May 3rd. That meeting is intended to be kind of a work session to work through the reports. And then the next thing that comes up is Thursday, May 5th, is another CBRC meeting. So we have 2 that week on the schedule. And then we'll present the budget or the report on the 17th.
So there's no meeting between the 5th and the 17th?
In terms of a CBRC meeting, that is correct. As of right now.
Lisa, did you think we'd be able to conclude our drafting of the documents by the 5th?
Lisa, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, Roger, I think the 5.3 and 5.5 are really work sessions to talk through. I think it's really formulating what we're going to say, and that, initially it was 5.10 was our goal to get the letter finalized and submitted. And now we have an extra week. So
So would you propose that we would meet on maybe the 12th to finalize everything?
yeah, I guess that would be the next Thursday, 5/12. Yeah, it could be that we, you know, people, however we decide to divide up the report, that, you know, if I'm willing to take on compiling what each, you know, however we divide the work, and compiling it into something that would be ready to review and discuss on the 12th.
So then the question is to the committee, are we willing to schedule a meeting on the 12th?
I mean, I think it's either a meeting or that, you know, we have kind of a remote working session. Everybody's putting their comments into the document, right? So that we have time to compile everything and finish it in order to complete it in time to present to the board on the 17th.
Well, I would propose that we meet on the 12th and resolve that we will finalize our reports on that at that meeting. And if everybody has done due diligence prior to that, we should be able to do it within a normal time frame of 2 hours.
So,
Is Renee, are you waiving your consent or?
okay, so when are we divvying? When are we going to decide who's going to write what? And I just want to confirm, I'm looking at my calendar. I don't know if I wrote this down correctly, but it says we have a budget meeting at 5 o'clock, or is that a different program for me? On May 3rd?
That's correct. That's a work session for us. And I think
That's for
that-
us?
that's for us only. And
Okay.
we'll be divvying up the responsibilities
Okay.
that night.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that that's what that was. Thank you.
So
And then I do
you'll
have
probably-
another question.
you'll probably be writing a major portion. So 3, 5, and 12. Jordan, you got that written down?
Wow, you act like we don't have a life. 3, 5, and 12?
Well, one thing to think about is we set up the 3rd and the 5th because we thought it was due on the 10th. But we do need to figure out who's going to work on what after we see the budget proposal, and or, I mean, we can decide on that in the next week of how we want to divvy this up. And so maybe people can look at, make sure everybody reads through the report from last year. That just kind of gives an indication of how the group went about it and the issues that were discussed and the recommendations, to think about, you know, what are some issues that people have an interest in, and or what are people willing to take on? And maybe that's that will help us in deciding how we're going to divvy up the work.
I say do it on the 3rd.
And not the, just
We're
dip,
gonna have all the
dip,
information
right.
by then. We should start on the 3rd. And then we can decide on the 3rd if we need another meeting on the 5th.
Right, and maybe depending on how we divide up the work, maybe the 5th could be an open session for various people to do their own on the side of, well, I guess we have to make it a public meeting, but yeah, so we can go from there.
Yeah, we got to be careful that we don't impinge on the public notice
Yeah.
process. And
Yeah.
so I guess
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I think we better, at least I would feel more comfortable if we stick with the 3rd, the 5th, and the 12th. But that's my opinion. So I'm willing to listen to others.
Yeah, I think leaving them there and they can be check-ins, and then if they end early, great. And if they don't, then that's fine too.
So there's nothing,
Okay.
nothing on the 10th.
Yeah, it sounds
Nothing
like
on the
that got
10th.
moved to the 17th.
That's okay. Okay, I got it.
And
3,
can I just
5,
ask,
12.
oh, and Jordan, for what we're turning in, is it actually we need to present it to the board, or is it like we submit it and that's done, or do we actually have to present it at a budget meeting, at a PPS meeting?
I mean, I actually don't. Noberto, you might have a better answer to that question.
So what I experienced last year was my first time. So just I don't know if that would be the expectation every time, or if it was a one-off. But the committee, the chair or the co-chair's advisor did present. It was essentially read the report. So there wasn't a PowerPoint deck, or there wasn't anything to that nature. But I also don't recall it being read verbatim, but like highlighting key points. So there was this formal exchange with the board.
We also have 2 board members here right now who might be able to shed some light on that.
Well, it's
I'm just throwing
Director
that out.
Holland's first time as well.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It is.
And
You're
Director
right.
Lori is she can't talk. So yeah.
I was going to say,
But
Never
Roger, yeah, but
historically, chair and co-chairs have presented the reports. And on some years, there's been board questions. Many years, they've just said, thank you very much, and patted us on the head and send us on our way. So whatever, it's like the State of the Union. It's required the president submit one, but historically, of recent years, it's been done in person, but originally it was presented as a written document. So we could start a new trend.
We can do a light show, maybe.
How about
Drop.
fireworks? So,
Just an
okay.
idea would be that it could be that the members of the committee are also like that, everybody is there, but I don't want to make that requirement for people. But
Historically, that everybody has been there,
Okay.
and it's been asked to be stand up and be recognized before the report's been presented. But
okay.
however anybody wants to, whatever the will of the group is I'm fine with that. So.
I'm just going to elevate what Director Lowry just put in the chat. She said the letter needs to be Wednesday before the board meeting.
Okay.
so then if it's being presented on the 17th, it would need to be in by the 11th. And
Yeah, so the 12th doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection.
Well, Ailey, I would ask you whether you don't think we couldn't fudge it to the 12th and stick with that. Oh, you don't think so? Okay, well, I do remember in previous years that we did get some fudge, but it's I sense the board is well, I'll just hold my comment, but anyway.
Well, I think we have the 5th and the 3rd, and then we have that weekend to really flush out the report, and people can comment in the actual document itself so that we can finalize it by the 11th. So I think that's what we should do and need to do.
Well, do we meet on the 11th then to do that?
We can't meet on the 11th because it's due on the 11th. So I know from last year, just from that was my first experience going through that, a lot of it was behind the scenes in the document itself of people commenting and just assigning. There's going to be, again, like someone just kind of flushing through and finalizing it once everybody submits their pieces and comments.
Well, I know last year we ended up going well past the time that it fell to the co-chairs to finalize the document, and I'm loath to have that happen again. It seems to me then we should plan to meet on the 10th and collectively finalize that. And let me point out to Ailey and to Gary, who I guess is on listening, that again, that it gives CBRC 10 days or roughly 2 weeks to review a New York phone book of the budget. So I think that indicates just how much our report is valued. So anyway. So let's meet on the 10th, and so 3, 5, 10.
Okay.
So Jordan, if you'll take care of notifying Kara so the notices go out and all that kind of stuff, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at the board meeting if at all possible. Thank you for your participation.
I have
tonight.
one more
Okay?
question. Sorry.
Okay, one more question. All right. Go ahead, Renee.
Jordan and Alberto, so the questions that I received from a parent, those have been submitted to staff?
I have put those into a document, and then I'm going to share that document with all of you, and the staff, us in our office, will get answers to all those questions.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That's what
I'm hoping we can get answers.
Yeah,
I'm hoping we can soon.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, no
in full transparency as well, I've been very behind on email, so
No problem.
but I wanted to make a note, and I intentionally had Jordan on it as well, so that they can keep me on track and we can document so that we can follow up.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to confirm because I got another email, so I will answer.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, keep sending those to me too.
I
I'll
figured
keep
you would
running
do
the
it.
document.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Oh. Anybody else have anything good for the order before we sign off? Again, I'll take note that we're adjourning at according to my clock, it's
I think Ailey has a question.
Oh, does she? I can't see. Okay, AA, go ahead.
She'll put it in the chat. Or we should, let me read the chat. What's that game? Pictionary or charades? 2 syllables. So Director Lori shared, okay, so it's regarding budget review. So I don't think the job of CBRC is to read every line. It is to decide if the budget is in keeping with the board goals. It's a 30,000-foot review, not a dive into every detail. Two words, Renee said, thank you.
With only 2 weeks, that's obvious. So, okay. So if there's no other comments or questions, I'll adjourn the meeting, and we're adjourning at 6:21. So good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.